Nicola Phillips from Peldon Rose. Thank you very much for joining me today.
You are most welcome, Katie. How are you?
Really good, thank you. It's always
Excellent.
better when the sun is shining, isn't it?
It's for sure.
So let's start by telling people a little bit about your role at Peldon Rose and what Peldon Rose do in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my name's Nicola Phillips, as Katie just said, and I'm a project director at Peldon Rose. So I look after clients from the start of their project to the completion of their project, and we design and build commercial office space. So we work predominantly in London, and we've been undertaking design and build projects for over 33 years now. So quite an extensive time, and we've got this really wonderful team of 110 staff that live out of our own office in Wimbledon. So we've been working with a whole range of clients, from media marketing clients to finance, lawyers, charities, and it's just it's wonderful to have a mix of different industries. It's amazing what you learn deep diving into different industries, into different cultures, and the learnings that you can take and actually share around. So as I said, we design and build commercial office spaces.
Now, we are Zooming with each other today because, of course, we've all been asked to work from home.
Yes, we have.
Now, as an office designer, do you think that this is going to affect offices when we go back to work? Do you think working trends are going to change?
It can't not, can it? We've entered into an unprecedented times that everybody's trying to find their feet. There's no such thing as business as usual. We're all finding an adaptive and adopting new ways of working. I think it's going to certainly open up businesses' minds to different ways of working, for sure. But we're obviously talking a lot with our clients remotely, like we are today, and people miss working with people. Office environments are created to bring together teams of people, and I think that's the bit that you can have the technology, and of course you can work remotely. It's just whether or not you want to work remotely, and indeed whether or not that produces the most effective way of working for businesses. So I think we're going to come through this with lots of learnings from how environments come together. I think it's going to help businesses open up their minds to different ways of being able to create those spaces, but ultimately create a kind of a destination space so that people have a place to come back to. We work a lot with clients to look at sort of agile working, which we can touch on a bit more detail, but whether or not that starts playing a stronger role in the office space. But it's going to have an impact on how we work together.
Well, speaking of agile working, not everyone might know that term. So
good point.
Do you want to explain a bit more about what agile working is?
Absolutely. So I guess agile working is a way of being able to change the spaces and the way that you operate. I suppose I like to look at it more as activity-based working. So from a cultural and organisation piece, you may have you will undoubtedly have different activities that you need to undertake. For example, you would need high focus working. You need to write a report. You need to get your head down for an hour or two. You don't want any disruptions. You don't want that telephone ringing. Where do you work? You need to work in a space that's going to allow you some focus time. So that's going to potentially start looking like a different space where you have the need for low focus work. So say you're just answering some emails, you've got some kind of light admin to undertake. So you could quite happily be interrupted during that activity. You can sit in the open plan area. So those kinds of activity-based working needs to be relative to the activities that you're undertaking. Now, that doesn't mean getting up every 5 minutes and moving around. but it needs spaces to allow you to be able to undertake the tasks that you have at hand. And let's not forget, different people respond to places and spaces in different ways. So you might have an extrovert that's very happy to sit in an open plan breakout area and work and talk to lots of other people, but maybe some more introverts would prefer a little kind of cozier, snug to work, and they would perform say a low focus task in very different ways. So it's very people centric, activity based working as well.
So what do you think the key activity areas in an office are? You've mentioned high focus work, so I'm assuming that's probably little booths where people can just concentrate on their own, and breakout spaces and open plan. Is there anything else that people
there's a whole array of things. Collaboration is really key to a lot of organisations, and collaboration again can come in lots of different guises depending on in terms of your business. And I suppose the variety is also really key there. So in terms of collaboration spaces, that may be a high table with some stools around it. You might want to keep that collaboration to a shorter meeting. That type of furniture helps support those shorter meetings. You might need some whiteboards. You might need a TV screen so that you can plug and present your presentation. It might mean a smaller little sort of phone, smaller little booth, or a phone booth where you need to collaborate remotely. So you've got to think about the acoustics and the furniture sitting within that. Or you might want a larger collaboration, let's say area where you need to get a whole team together. It might be of 10 people. So what does that start looking like? That might need whiteboards. It might need smaller little chairs to sit on, to be able to make that environment grow and expand depending on how you might want to use that. So collaboration spaces are really key. Meeting areas have definitely kind of moved forward leaps and bounds. So meeting rooms, we typically do studies on how businesses operate. We find that meeting rooms are generally really underutilized. So the old traditional large boardroom that sits maybe 12 to 20 people is probably only utilized sort of maybe once a month, or and less frequently. So being able to have smaller spaces that can open up to allow for changing needs is really, really key. So things like that, we start looking at folding walls to open up two spaces, so you can have one large room and then you pull a folding wall across and then you've got two independent spaces. It's a really, really great investment to be able to utilize your space. So meeting rooms are really key. So meeting spaces can happen in open plan breakout areas. They can take place in smaller little booths. Again, it depends on the activity, because if you want the larger groups, then you can work in the kind of maybe larger spaces. If it's smaller, little 1 or 2 people, you can take in smaller booths.
Do you think there's still a place for open plan working where people have their sort of mini booths on banks of desks, or do you think their time has passed?
So when I think about open plan, it's that was definitely kind of like, there was a big reaction to work it from the traditional route of working in more cellular spaces. So there's a need for a mix, and I think, you know, when you start looking at human-centric design and the mix of people that make up a team of people, I guess in the UK, there's about 1 in 3 people will suffer from mental health condition at some point in their life, and so therefore that's a third of the workforce that might be suffering from, and they call this sort of like neurotypical, so not even kind of like any spectrum, but just kind of neurotypical sort of normal people would suffer from anxiety, stress, depression. So if you imagine those kind of people within a large open span space, there's kind of nowhere for them to feel centered, nowhere to take refuge. So it's not going to bring out the best in people. So if you're looking at that as a third of the population, an open plan environment create a number of threats within that. And that is aside from talking about introverts and extroverts and everything all in between. So when I talk about activity-based working, you're also changing the actual physical landscape of the space. You're creating areas where people can work in slightly larger spaces, people can work in smaller little nooks, people can have the opportunity to walk out of their desk and not feel like they're going to be exposed or kind of pounced upon, or, you know, and giving people the opportunity to have focused working. So I would say that, you know, the landscape of the working environment needs to have a mix of different kind of cellular and non-cellular, and a kind of a range in between, to allow people to be their best selves and bring them best selves to work.